in this time where it's like this really, we just went from like this super yang paradigm to like intensely yin, like everyone's in their house, it's like, for me, energetically, what I'm feeling right now is like, do not work. Like, take this time. Like, I was ready to do like telemedicine and like da 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 da. And I'm like, I can't bring myself to do it because I actually don't feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I feel like I'm supposed to be like, maybe be more creative and like meditative and kind of tapping in, like letting God or what the universe like flow through me and just channel shit and like just communicate and do podcasts and write and whatever. And that to me feels like a way better use of my energy right now too, which is weird. I'm like, I can't believe I'm not over here like, all right, let's telemedicine this. Like, but I don't really feel called to do that right now.
I love that. And I think you're not the first person I've had that conversation with that feels that way, that there's this story going around that like now is our time, that we're supposed to be stepping in, and, offering something. And actually most of the people that I know who are incredible healers and light workers are not feeling called to do that. Either they're just kind of communicating from the sidelines or putting out smaller offerings, or, it's just sort of time for all of us, I think, to be internal with what's opening in this new phase for each one of us.
This is like an incubation period is kind of what it feels like, right? It's like we're just dropping into this really intense period of like stillness. And I feel like going and trying to like grind things out and like work my ass off right now is actually going against the energetics of what's happening right now. And so it wouldn't actually work well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think every time I've tried to fight it, I've found myself feeling kind of exhausted or, just like not great. It's like, okay, this is the sign, that it's calling you to take it easy.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, I feel like that's part of this process too, is like just not feeding into that old story. Like if we're watching this paradigm shift happening, we're in that right now. It's like, if we're not honoring that, then we're not going to get out of it what we should be getting out of it right now.
We just have to be really gentle with ourselves right now because it's going to change every day. Like every day I'm going through something different. It's really been fascinating. And like yesterday I felt great. Like all day yesterday, I woke up, I was like, I feel fantastic. I feel clear. Like the whole day was like really, really good. And then this morning I woke up and I felt super emotional and heavy. And I was just like, there's just so much happening in the world right now. And there's so much energy moving. It's like, we have to be really patient with ourselves, like this is just, it's an undoing, it's a process and we're all in it,
I mean, and also it's like, this is a period of grief. I mean, this is a respiratory illness. It's like the lungs, it's grief. It's like the grieving of old paradigms falling away. And like those paradigms, as much as like, I don't like them, they serve me really well at times. So it's like, there's also like you need to like be able to let go of some of those things in order to move through to the other side,
And I do think that this is a shift that, and I don't think I'm alone in seeing this, but that we will not be the same after this. This is changing the nature of our reality. And even though it's terrible and hard and scary, it's like a change that was almost inevitable and had to come because we were on a track running ourselves into a dead end, and something had to break, something had to move. And hopefully this is all it will be, because it could actually be so much worse considering what, we've been trying to maintain as a society that isn't actually healthy.
It's gotten so bad. As much as I even recognize how bad it was, it's not until right now when I'm having to be still that I'm like, wow, I was really caught up in that. That's the reason why I need to travel and I need to get out of the States as often as I do, because it's like, I need the reality check. I need to like step away from it and then come back to it. And I've been here for a while now and I'm like, I'm fully sucked into it. I've owned a business for the last year and a half. It's just like,
yes. I really understand that. This is part of why I always live out of the country as well. And we have that in common, needing to get away. And I spent most of the last 2 years in the US. And I didn't really want to, but I felt something inside of me that was like, come back, almost like face this world that you don't agree with and that you actually kind of hate, like there was some healing in that for me. So I'm assuming something like that was going on with you too. And I think this happens to a lot of people when we end up somewhere that isn't actually in resonance with us. It's almost like there's some sort of healing process going on around it. And I also was having a very hard time the last year figuring out how to navigate being in American reality and society without being sucked into it, especially in the spiritual wellness scene, because that is my world of where I offer my work. And yet what I see happening in the spiritual wellness scene in America honestly makes me kind of ill, like it's so.
In what way?
Because it's so, in my viewpoint, it is not focused on what is true and what actually matters. There's a very huge focus on, it's sort of like, that fable of like the finger pointing to the moon. It's like, I always mess it up, but it's like I think it's Hindu. And they always say like the finger that points at the moon, don't look at the finger, you're being pointed to the moon. And what I see a lot in Western societies, we get obsessed with the finger, and we get like obsessed with the product and what we can do with it, when it's really not about that. It's about what we're being pointed to. It's about the moon. And for me, that's like my connection to source and divinity within myself. And one of my goals is to always bring people to that space of them finding their own connection to source and divinity and, groundedness of their infinite nature into their own bodies and beings. And what I see in Western society is that we're just completely obsessed with the surface level.
Because our systems and our culture tell us to be, it's like it's hard when we're being able to seek it externally all the time and have the value of our success and who we are, our self-worth, be put in material terms. It's like, it's the complete opposite of that,
Yeah, it is. And it's very, people are very much seeking answers and to be validated, which is okay, in a certain way. But I don't love when that's being taken advantage of. And you see that a lot in the alternative scene, where people are set up to be gurus that have all the answers, or, if I tell people I'm an intuitive, I book a lot more sessions than if I tell them I want to bring you back to source, because people are they don't realize what they actually want and desire. And so there's almost this trickery that has to happen, that sometimes I'm willing to play a little bit when it feels right. But deep down inside, there's this like rebel in me that's like, are we going to graduate from this already? Because I'm kind of over it. Like, I don't really want to play this game anymore.
Well, it's like people don't know what they're looking for, but then if you have to also, as that person leading them there, know what they're ready to receive and what they're not. Because a lot of people aren't ready to receive that, and they actually don't want it.
100%. And that's the deeper issue, right? Is that most of us negate what we actually want and need inside. And finding ways to hold people in that has been one of my missions, but when I look around me at like the world that has been created around health and wellness in the US, I'm just like, oh boy, guys, like, are we on the wrong road or what here?
It's so American. I feel like all I do is tell people, like, people come to my office. I think I said this to you, but it's like, people are like, I sleep 4 hours a night. I work 60 hours a week. I go to CrossFit 5 days a week. It's so fucking American. It's just like so intense. It's like, no wonder you don't know what you want. You literally can't even like find time to sleep.
Yeah.
And you're like not shitting, and you're not like what is happening? But it's like, if you come to me and you're like, I don't have a period, I'm not taking a shit for 4 days, but I go to CrossFit 5 days a week and eat my smoothie every day. I'm always, I feel like half the time, all I'm doing is like telling people, okay, listen to your body. Like, what do you actually need? And it's the same thing spiritually. It's like, what do you actually need? Mm-hmm. And how are you 100%. Seeking that externally and not within yourself? Like,
yes,
there's a lot of that.
I think one of the reasons it gets to me so much is because I know what it feels like to be that person, because for so many years, I was that person. For so many years, I was in so much internal pain that I was completely susceptible to a lot of the rhetoric that was out there, or that is out there. And I very blessedly had mentors from a young age that were the real deal, that brought me home to myself, that were totally trustable guides. But a lot of people don't have that. And I see people getting lost in the bullshit constantly. And just all the misinformation and all the, like, follow the fancy guru on Instagram who has the perfect photos, but if you met them in person, probably has like nothing to offer.
But I think one of the root causes of that is that we are living in a time where we are so busy and so distracted and so here in our minds, and we're not in our bodies and we're not in our intuition. We're totally disconnected from that. And I think, like, I see it with women a lot. It's like, take the birth control, cut it off, like cut off the intuition, cut off the like brain and uterus connection, like things like that. It's like, we are told from every angle to not be in tune with that. And so it's like, if you're walking around and you're not in tune with that, you're more susceptible to giving your power away or seeking all of these things externally, because you can't cut through the noise to hear yourself.
100%. And it's some people are so down that rabbit hole that even the thought of getting back to your own body seems like, it seems impossible almost, I think, for people that have a lot of PTSD and trauma and pain. I was
going to say trauma plays such a big role in it.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, too, there's almost I always call it like the existential PTSD of just being alive, which is we have a lot of very sensitive beings coming onto the planet right now, for good reason, because we're going through an awakening as a society. But these very sensitive beings, I always say it's like, you literally might have PTSD from just being a human, like, even if like nothing actually happened to you. It's like
half the time I'm like, am I feeling the collective shit or is it mine? So it's sometimes it's hard to feel through it and know what's yours and what's not,
Well, and that's the other thing, is the collective field is so strong that it can be, or seemingly strong, that it can be very, very difficult to come home to ourselves. And I think that was part of why I put myself back in the US the last couple of years. It was almost like my training ground of coming home to myself no matter what, because I had obviously, I'd felt like I mastered that being out of my root conditioning. And it was almost
it's like spiritual edging, like see how close you can get.
It totally is. It was like, okay, now go back in. Can you hold it now? Can you hold it now? What's that Ram Dass quote? Like, if you think you're enlightened, go home and live with your parents.
But that's some real stuff. And another thing for me too is like epigenetics. I'm like super nerdy about this, but it's like, we're starting to learn that we do carry the trauma, the intergenerational trauma from like our lineage. And, they've been able to measure that. Like, they were doing a study, the cohort of kids who were in utero during 9/11 in New York. And they're studying these kids who are now in their 20s, and they're seeing a correlation with increased anxiety and PTSD and things like that for no apparent reason. But they're noticing there's things like that where, these kids, because epigenetics, it's like the genetic structure changes with trauma. And we know that. Wow. We can see certain genes are turned on and off with traumatic experiences. So your grandmother is raped when she's 12, and then she goes on to reproduce with that altered DNA. It's, wow. I mean, that's real. I mean, and I think there's a lot of that we don't even know that we're carrying a lot of time.
No, I agree with that. That's actually something I talk to people a lot about in my work, is that this is mostly unconscious, actually. Like, there's a lot of healing and transformation that goes on for people on the unconscious level. And it's that thing where you suddenly just feel like something has shifted, but maybe you don't even know what it is. It's like, because we are all so connected in this unconscious reality, and we all have like places that we're plugged into different things, so it's not going to be all things that you recognize or know with your mind even. because we are all connected in that way. Actually, we're all somehow plugged into the field of the collective pain suffering story. But my view is that's shifting, and that's part of why we're all actually being pulled deep down into it right now, is because it's like time to heal this, like this is asking to transform, this is moving. And before that occurs, it often feels worse, than.
Yeah. Well, and then look at our modern day lives. Like we have all of these things that are distractions, like social media, technology. I mean, they're also really amazing tools too, but I think a lot of those things are used. I think that we have a lot of addiction going on, and it's not just with substances. It can manifest that way, but it's also like, with behavior patterns and thought patterns and with these things that pull us away from actually feeling those really uncomfortable feelings. And that's to me is the way through it, is to just be in it. Like it's feel it, then you heal it. Like, but a lot of us, it's hard. It's really, really uncomfortable.
I know. It's such a huge topic of conversation. Like I could literally talk about this all day. Like literally it's like there's so many nooks and crannies in that. It's insane, but this is part of why, like I always tell everybody, each person is so individual, and to trust your own journey and to trust the way life is unfolding for you, because that's where like all of the answers are. It's all of the answers lie in the moment of how your life is unfolding. And each moment is an invitation into what can transform for you. And when you start discovering that magic, life just becomes a lot more fun and a lot more interesting, actually, because it's so easy to become stagnant in the heaviness or the pain. And truthfully, like what I've learned over the years is that stagnancy of pain and suffering is a resistance to the current moment. Oftentimes even more than the thing that we're actually trying to avoid. And when we can find it in ourselves to show up with an open heart to ourselves and to all that we are experiencing and feeling, and what is there for us, even when it's wildly uncomfortable, which a lot of the times it is, beautiful magic and miracles occur. And I've experienced that so many times in my own life that, if there's one thing that I could say for sure, like that's it.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you. And I also think, from like a mind body perspective, I get I get patients all the time who come in, they're like, I have this back pain that's chronic for 10 years. And it's like, your body is sending you the signals. Your body is sending you the signals that you aren't spending enough time in those uncomfortable places and processing those emotions. And especially when it comes to PTSD, we all have trauma and to varying degrees, but it's like, you process what you can, and then you put that somewhere and you move forward to survive. But it's like that's still in your body, and it's better to try to process those things as you go so they don't manifest in this crazy physical form, whether it's cancer or pain or fibromyalgia or whatever. It's like all of those physical symptoms, they're not totally caused by that, but those are contributing factors in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. And I think that also a perspective that I like to take sometimes with things like that also is that they are signposts to like our biggest invitations, and almost make it like a positive thing. It's like, okay,
I
so you
love
have
that.
chronic pain here. That's a doorway. What is that? Like what can we open there that's going to actually transform your entire life? Because the body actually, in my opinion, is on our side all the time, even when something happens that seems bad. So like even like something like cancer or something totally tragic, it's like the body is trying to do everything that it knows to keep us safe and to, communicate with us and to love us. And it's like only our minds that can't understand it all the time and misinterpret its signals and don't really learn the language of how our body is trying to communicate with us.
Definitely. It's like, in Chinese medicine, we actually have a saying where where there's pain, there's stagnation. If there's any pain at all, there's always a stagnation of blood flow, of chi flow. And that can come as a result of something physical or also emotional. So it's like, if you're constantly overthinking or you're constantly stressed, for example, that's one example, but that causes like a tension, an inner tension that just builds and builds and builds. And, if you're not releasing that, or you're not, doing things like body work or acupuncture or exercise that help to keep things flowing, that's going to, build up over time and start manifesting in these signposts. It's like, but there's always messages, and our body is always trying to get back to a state of balance. Always. Our bodies are so smart. I think there's like this craving that a lot of people have for authenticity and just realness. And it's like, like I'm a practitioner of Chinese medicine. I believe in holistic health. I try to eat healthy, but you know what? I grew up in North Carolina and I love fried chicken. I'm always going to eat fried chicken. Like, just
Totally.
like, that kind of stuff where it's like, people project this one version of themselves that most people see, but I think it's the authenticity that people really need.
Totally. And I'm trying to that's been my whole goal this last year or two, is trying to find that, because trying to find how to share that, because I am the same as you, where I have this deep mystical side that is very in tune with what's going on with life on deeper levels and whatnot. But I'm never going to be the person that shows up being Om Shanti, I have no personality and I'm so centered. Now we're going to talk and I'm going to talk to you like this and blah, 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 which is this persona that's out there in the spiritual world that people are so wowed by, oh, this person's so awakened because they put on the fucking spiritual outfit and they're talking in spiritual language. And I'm like, you know what, guys, that's actually not the only way to go through awakening. We can actually have a personality and be ourselves and also have fun and laugh and make things light and be real and be authentic and show up and explore and navigate. It's you can do all of it.
Well, and it's I feel in those situations too, both the guru and the people there need to realize that there's obviously something to be examined there. If you're looking to this person to be your guide and you're looking to this person to be that authority for you and bring you to that experience, then there's something to examine about that. And on both sides. And I think that, you get these people who get drunk off of power and being in that position. And I see those people sometimes and I'm just that is so inauthentic to me, because I see right through it and I see it for what it is. And it's hard for me to stomach it. It's within that community, those communities, there's a lot of ego, and it's really hard when it's the whole basis of that is to be detached from your ego and to be, and it's there's a lot of corruption and inauthenticity out there when it comes to.
My hope is that it will shift at some point. And a friend of mine once said to me, because we were talking about when people sort of turn against you, if anyone who's ever been in a situation where maybe there's a rumor about you, or something is going on and suddenly people have a story about you or whatnot. And he was the truth always comes out. Always. It might take a really long time, but the truth always comes out. And it was this invitation to just stand in who you are and what you know to be true. And I think about that with the world right now. There's so much, kind of inauthenticity and people being lost in the external images and not the truth, and a lot of illusion. But
a lot.
If we stand in the truth that we know as individuals, eventually the truth comes out, and it's it might take a really long time, but it will. And I feel I'm finding more and more people in my reality these days that are aware of this than not, it hasn't hit the mainstream yet.
No, and I feel definitely it has to come from an individual, a place of individual, seeking that and tuning into that. But also, I don't know if you feel the same, but I felt even since I was a kid, I felt I had to try to fit into this mainstream, education, mainstream, American dream. I mean, this is maybe an American thing, but I've really struggled as an artist, as a creative person, how to find a way to be authentic and be that person and step into that and still like make a living and still, have success in this society. And that's what's been really hard for me is like, I have this desire so badly to be authentic and be this person, but also like, does that mean that I have to be poor? And there's like this whole, I mean, obviously there's like whole like journey with abundance and like manifesting and everything with that. But it's like, it also is hard when you're in the context of a society that has value on those more superficial.
100%. And this was my biggest journey of the last couple of years, because what happened was I was in this place in my life where I felt so clear and so at peace within myself. And I felt like, this is it. Like, I'm here, like I'm in the place I've always wanted to be, right? In my own being, in my own body. And I wanted to share that with people. Actually, it was funny. At first, I didn't want to share it with people. I really didn't care.
Yeah.
At first, I was like, cool, I'm here and you can be wherever you want to be. And I really don't give a shit. And so then I backed away for a little while from sharing in a big way. Then I felt like an awakening inside of myself to be in service. And I was like, okay, like I feel this coming forward. But what was blaring at me the whole time was terror about security. It was so strong and so loud. And it took a long time, like literally probably the last year, I've been sorting through that layer by layer and just like letting it all move, because it was like the deep, deep realization that being totally in your truth and totally authentic is actually one of the most terrifying, scary things that we can do as humans. And it doesn't make sense to our brains, because you're like, what's the big deal? Be yourself. And everybody always talks about be yourself, blah, 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 blah. But if we dive into our DNA and our cellular structure and the eons that have been lived where people could not be in their authentic self, because it was legit a survival issue. If you are shunned by the crowd, you die. If you are, a little bit abnormal, somebody's going to, hang you or burn you at the stake,
or tell you you're mentally ill or
exactly.
lock you in a prison, it's like, and that still exists in the world all over the place today. Yep. And it's like, I think that's another part of it for me too, is I think about that a lot. I'm like, I am so privileged to be able to just be out and like be my authentic self. And there's still so many people in the world that don't have that. And I mean, it's just for me also been this journey of like keeping that in mind and how to respect that while I'm doing, there's a lot of layers to it.
And you know what? There is for everybody. And that's the thing is like, I think right now that's one of the deeper invitations going on for a lot of us, is the peeling away of those ingrained layers, because they're not just ours, as we've been talking about, like they're collective fears. And the root system of humanness right now is completely about survival. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like getting thrown into that, like that, you might not survive kind of feeling if you are totally authentic. You might not have money, you might not have food, you might not have friends, you might literally die, like, because that's the story that's being told on a deep level, even if like our conscious human brains know that's not true.
It so depends on like how you were brought up and like the community that you were brought up in. I mean, I know I was told like who you are and what you're passionate about and how you make a living are not one and the same. You make a living and you do what you need to do to survive, and then you follow your passion on the side, or it's like it totally depends on how you grew up and like what you were told, and all of those stories are so ingrained in us. It's just an unlearning.
Totally. Yeah. And it takes time, like these things are like ingrained in our DNA. Like you said, it's like, it takes time and patience to allow those things to heal and to transform, So, I think that's one of the biggest frustrations that humans face often, is that our minds have a very different perception of how things should go than, isn't actually.
It's these expectations and the attachment that we have to those expectations,
Totally.
I know for me, it's like I was just about to start a new job and I was going to be making a salary. And as an acupuncturist in the US, that's unheard of, like unless you're working in a hospital. And I found this job that I was so excited about. And last Monday, I found out that I didn't have it the day before I was supposed to move to Maryland. It was gone because of the
Wow.
coronavirus. And I'm like, I'm realizing this week, like how attached I was to that salary and that security, because for me, that was a sign of like, okay, I chose my own path and I did it my way. And then now I can have a salary and have the security and have done it my way. And it's like this whole attachment, this whole story I've had around like, I went off I took the less traveled path and then I found my way back to like security and I beat the system. But now it's like the universe is like, ha ha, no, you didn't.
Yeah. It's
Good
like, oh,
try.
did you think you had that figured out? Because we're just going to smash that belief to pieces.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I feel like that's
now sit in your house and think about that for an indefinite period of time.
Totally. I feel like that's been the story of my life every time I get attached to anything, or I think anything is like, this is what it is. Like life comes in and it's just like, no, like you're just going to have to let that go.
I know. I'm glad I'm laughing about it right now. Definitely hasn't been funny the last week.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're laughing about it too. That makes me happy.